Hi, everyone, and welcome to Mrs. Pam Reads. Just so you know, the cat is on the table. So if the video shakes a little bit, it's because she's rubbing her face up against the computer. Today, we are continuing in our story, Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella. And we are in the last section. See, there she goes. The last section of part 4. And in our last video, poor Karen, their daughter fell off the bleachers and I think she was unconscious and struggling to breathe. So that's where we're at as we continue. All right, so this would be, part 4, section 12. I curse myself for not knowing anything about first aid, for not knowing any medical techniques, for not even having read about any. Initials like NBC, FDS, CPR, STP flash across my brain like subliminal advertising blurbs. One of them is a rescue technique, or mouth to mouth, or at least for heart attacks. I don't know. My brain is numb as a piece of liver. We'd better not move her, I hear myself saying. They never move anyone on the TV shows. I realize as I say it that it must qualify for the Inane Statement of the Year award. Karen's lips are bluish, and her eyes are open, the pupils rolled back to reveal a bloodshot whiteness, ugly as beef fat. She gasps for air, and it seems to me that she is convulsing. Call an ambulance, I say to Annie, and she sprints for the house, happy to have a task to take her mind off the tragedy. Gypsy follows along behind her. Richard stands silently behind me. How long? Asks Jerry. It's a 20-minute drive from town. In the silence, we can hear the corn rustling behind the fence. What if I am wrong? What if I've made a decision that will kill my daughter? I look furiously at Jerry, who reads my face. You had to make a choice, he says quietly. Most of the players have gathered below us on the left field grass and stand staring up, silent, as if waiting to hear a speech. I kneel on the step below Karen, my hands wavering above her in indecision. Her nose and one side of her face have been severely scraped by her fall. Blood trickles from her nose, across her cheek, and down her neck. She is becoming bluer, and her cough is faint, as though she is in another room. Her arms appear pale through her tan. Her freckles look as if they are resting on snow. I glance over my shoulder to see that Bluestein has taken off his $300 pale green velvet corduroy jacket and is wordlessly holding it out toward me. Our eyes meet, and for an instant, we share the grief of losing a beloved child. Our other pursuits, whether they be baseball or land acquisition, become insignificant. Jerry takes the jacket and covers Karen gently, as if she were made of flower petals. Though it seems like hours, only a couple of moments have passed. Annie is probably only now reaching the phone. May at this very moment be calling the ambulance. I am beginning to feel that I have made the wrong decision and consider clutching Karen into my arms and running for the car, starting on a mad drive to Iowa City. Then I feel compelled to look at the baseball field. In order to do that, I stand up and walk a few steps up the bleacher. What I see is Moonlight Graham, loping in from right field, lithe, dark, athletic, the same handsome young man who played that one inning of baseball in 1905. But as he moves closer, his features begin to change. His step slows. He seems to become smaller. His baseball uniform fades away and is replaced by a black overcoat. His baseball cap is gone, supplanted by a thatch of white hair. As I watch, his glove miraculously turns into a black bag. The man who, without a backward glance, walks around the corner of the fence, a place where none of the players will venture, is not Moonlight Graham, the baseball player of long ago, but the Doc Graham I spoke with on that moonlight night in Chisholm, Minnesota, when I flew across the dimensions of time. As he walks towards us, I recall how a former nurse of his said that he never carried his black bag when they went on a call, but insisted that she carry it. "What have we got here?" he says, muttering matter-of-factly. "She fell," we all say together, even Bluestein. "This child's choking to death," says Doc, and he picks her up with one hand under her shoulders and the other under her knees. He seats himself on the bleacher, shaking himself a little to get his coat out of the way. He turns Karen face down with her head pointing toward the floor. He supports her chest with one hand, while with the heel of the other, he delivers a series of sharp blows between her shoulder blades. Annie and Gypsy come running back. "Who?" says Annie. "A doctor," I reply. I can see some of the pain retreat from her face. Doc repeats the process, and I can suddenly see Karen's diaphragm expand as she sucks in air. Doc reaches around and pries her mouth open, releasing a sizable piece of hot dog and bun. As he turns her over, I can see the blueness disappearing from her face as she continues to breathe deeply. Doc peels back each eyelid in turn, stares at the pupil for a few seconds, and lets the eye close. "Looks to be okay," he says. "She should be coming around in a minute or two." He recovers her with Bluestein's jacket. "The ambulance?" says Annie. "Won't do any harm to have her checked, but I bet she'll be fine." The relief that washes over me is like a flood of warm water. His medical work done, Doc looks around him. He scratches his head. His eyes light on me and hold. "Why, you're the young fellow who was waiting outside my house the other night." "Ray Kinsella," I say. "My daughter," I point to Karen, whose eyelids are beginning to flutter. "My wife," I point to Annie. Then, for no reason I can fathom, I introduce everyone, even Abner Bluestein. "Well now, it's lucky I happened on the scene, Ray Kinsella. That little girl wouldn't have lasted very much longer." I look at him, smiling from ear to ear, and I recall someone saying of Doc, he was always the first at the side of an injured player in any sport. But I wonder how much he has sacrificed to save Karen's life. It seems to me that he will never be able to walk back onto the ball field as Moonlight Graham. He has violated some cosmic rule that I vaguely know exists and do not even attempt to understand. I reach out and take his hand, holding it with both of mine. "Thank you," I say. "Now, you were the fellow who was talking about a baseball wish, weren't you?" "I was." "You dropped down to the school one day, Ray Kinsella, and we'll talk some more about that. Not that I believe you could do it at all. I'd best be getting back," he goes on. "Alicia will be expecting me." He walks briskly around the corner of the bleacher into the dark summer cornfield. Karen blinks her eyes and raises a small brown hand to rub at her head. Oh, honey, we're so glad you're okay. Annie and I are both kissing her small freckled cheeks. Boy, Daddy, you counted at that fat man just like you do when I don't eat my turnips, she says excitedly. I have spent close to 2 hours explaining to Richard what has happened to me since the voice of the baseball announcer first boomed out. If you build it, he will come. But I finally arrive at the spot where I become bogged down like a car stuck in the sand. Richard, what would you do if Dad played some semi-pro baseball in Florida and California? What if he made the big leagues? Richard sits on the other side of the inner insect-legged table in his camper. The tension lines between his brows are deep as ditches as he frowns at me in the orangey light. I stumble on. What if you had a chance to meet Dad? To meet your father? You mean you've brought him back to life? Like you brought Shoeless Joe Jackson back to life? Not me, but somehow. But he's out there, Richard. Not like we ever knew him. He's 25 years old and he's catching for the White Sox. And he has his whole life in front of him and doesn't know about us. But I can't see it, your ball field, says Richard, though Gypsy can. And I know she wouldn't put me on about something like that. In front of the camper, the part that rests over, well, there she is. Hey, Cora. I know. Okay. In front of the camper, the part that rests over the cab of the truck, I can see Gypsy's slight form curled up on the bed like a child, like the remnants of a 13-year-old who ran away from her parents' home in Kellogg, Idaho, and discards layers of her identity in secret places all across the face of America in the process of becoming very wise. The silence is long, and I am beginning to feel ill at ease when Richard says, I'd go to him. I don't know what I'd tell him, but I'd become his friend. Ray, people toss around the phrase heaven on earth, but it seems to me you've gotten a lock on it. Play it for all it's worth. Heaven on earth indeed. I think of virtually nothing else for the next day. Karen is home, a bit subdued, her bruises and scrapes still visible. The near loss has affected us all. We each seem to be more concerned about the other after having had our mortality waved in front of our faces. At the ballpark, Annie snuggles against me, her small hand inserted flat inside my shirt, her fingers warm on my chest. Gypsy leans close to Richard, whispering to him a play-by-play of the action taking place on the field. Often she jumps delightedly and cheers, then slides back down next to Richard and stares up at him with her ironic smile, so full of love, and tell him what has happened. Salinger has appeared preoccupied all day, and his eyes are far away tonight as he sits and hums absently, tapping one large hand on the knee of his jeans. What he is humming makes me smile, for it is the tune Richard and Karen use when they chant the song of the cardinal. Mothers, bring your daughters. Fathers, bring your sons. The world's strangest babies are here. Buy your ticket and come on in. Late in the game, Salinger suddenly taps me on the arm. I've had a dream, he says when I turn to look at him. I know how things are going to turn out. Things? I say. The farm. Listen, it will be like this. He moves down and sits in front of us, his back to the game, so he can deliver a lecture like a professor with 5 graduate students who has been assigned an amphitheater for a classroom. It will be almost a fraternity, like one of those tiny exclusive French restaurants that have no sign, but you find it almost by instinct. The people who come here will be drawn. He stops, searching for words. Have you ever been walking down the street and stopped in mid stride and turned into a bookstore or a gallery you never knew existed? People will decide to holiday in the Midwest for reasons they can't fathom or express. They'll turn off I-80 at the Iowa City exit, drive around the campus, get out and stroll across the lawns, look at the white columns of the old Capitol building, have supper at one of the tiny little restaurants, and then decide to drive east for a while on a secondary highway. They'll watch the hawks soaring like Chinese kites in the early evening air. They'll slow down when they see your house. And they'll ooh and ah at the whiteness of it, the way it sits in the cornfield like a splotch of porcelain. They'll say how beautiful it is and comment on how the flags snap in the breeze. At this point, they won't even realize that the flags fly over a center field. They'll be hypnotized by the way the corn sways in the breeze. They'll turn up your driveway, not knowing for sure why they're doing it, and arrive at your door, innocent as children, longing for the gentility of the past, for home canned preserves, ice cream made in a wooden freezer, gingham dresses, and black and silver stoves with high warming ovens and cast iron reservoirs. Of course, we don't mind if you look around, you'll say. It's only $20 per person. And they'll pass over the money without even looking at it, for it is money they have and peace they lack. They'll walk out to the bleacher and sit in shirt sleeves, in the perfect evening, or they'll find they have reserved seats somewhere in the grandstands or along one of the baselines, wherever they sit when they were children and cheered their heroes in whatever park it was, whatever leaf-shaded town in Maine or Ohio or California. They'll watch the game, and it will be as if they have knelt in front of a faith healer or dipped themselves in magic waters, where a saint once rose like a serpent and cast benedictions to the wind like peach petals. The memories will be so thick that the outfielders will have to brush them away from their faces. Squarish cars parked around a farm schoolhouse, blankets covering the engine blocks, Christmas carols drifting like tinsel birds toward the gold wash of the northern lights. Women shelling peas in linoleum-floored kitchens, cradling the unshelled pods in brindled aprons, tearing open corn husks and waiting for the thrill of the cool, sweet scent. Apple-cheeked children and collie dogs, the coffee and oil smell of a general store, people gliding over the snow in an open cutter, the dazzling smell of horsehide blankets teasing the senses. I don't have to tell you that the one constant through all the years has been baseball. America has been erased like a blackboard, only to be rebuilt and then erased again. But baseball has marked time while America has rolled by like a procession of steamrollers. It is the same game that Moonlight Graham played in 1905. It is a living part of history, like calico dresses, stone crockery, and threshing crews eating at outdoor tables. It continually reminds us of what once was, like an Indian head penny in a handful of new coins. I'll bet some of the men will be dragging along little women in flowered house dresses and high heels who will see nothing and whine about sitting on backless bleacher seats for 2 hours. And occasionally, a woman will pull a long, pale, sink-chested husband, or one squat as a rosebush who looks like a bulldog with a cigar clenched in his teeth, who gave up the sports page for the Dow Jones average when he was 21. And while she watches and thrills, he'll read the financial pages of the Times or the Trib and be soothed as a pacifier soothes the baby. But mostly, the arrivals will be couples who have withered and sickened of the contrived urgency of their lives. As Jerry speaks, a car turns off the highway and, in the twilight, zippers up the long driveway toward the house. It is a black Chrysler with a scorched gold license plate of New York State. You talk a good dream, I say to Salinger. Behind me, I hear cars. Richard and Gypsy will be there selling tickets to the ballpark. Near their trailer, farther up the driveway, Karen will sit in a child-sized table, her orange cat curled around her ankles, chanting the carnival litany, and above her will be the garish canvas signs. She will offer the newcomers passage to the exhibit, but they'll shake their heads tolerantly and walk on towards the baseball stadium where the lights blaze furiously. I dream of things that never were, says Jerry. I spot a car with Ohio plates. In the dusk, its occupants resemble Wanda Lee and Frank, the holdup man, and the waitress from Cleveland. I am smiling, hi, Cora, convulsively. Whoever controls the strings must be chuckling. Treat me like the heroine in The Perils of Pauline. By midnight, if the cars keep arriving, I'll have more than enough money to bring the mortgage up to date. I'll go and see what those cars want, says Gypsy. What cars? Says Richard. Interesting. The game tonight has been a double header, and when it is finally over, Richard and I walk out on the cornfield. My fists are clenched, my tongue a piece of rock chipping against my teeth. As we make our way toward the plate, I feel like a school child commanded to an audience with the principal, who, until now, has only been a rumor. Richard and I stand close together, side by side, like the figures representing the Gemini astrology sign. The catcher has been talking to Chuck Gill. He looks at us and smiles, and I can feel my heart shatter, but I do not die. Richard's hand grimly holds my bicep, his knuckles white. I admire the way you catch a game of baseball, I say, my voice sounding like thunder in a nearly empty park. I don't hear his reply, which is spoken in a gentle voice and accompanied by another smile. Richard's smile, my smile, just a little off center, showing teeth crammed together like passengers in a crowded elevator. I'll have Richard's fingerprints bruised into my arm for weeks. I stare at Richard's face, his eyes wide as those of a kid who's just had a coin pulled from his ear by a magician. All evening, I have been peeling gauze from my eyes. Jerry and I have taken turns, actually. Jerry eulogizing about the lost past and the purity of baseball, and I counting cars, looking at the fans that accumulate around us on the bleachers and fit into the phantom stands like baseballs tossed into a sea of baseballs. I feel as if I am watching a war movie in which a nurse is removing the last feet of white bandage from a soldier's eyes. Will he see? My father stops speaking and looks questioningly at Richard, who is squinting at him as though he is at the far end of a microscope. He's been having a little trouble with his eyes, but I think it's clearing up, I say. It's true, says Richard, air exploding from his lungs. It is true, I reply. I admire the way you catch a game of baseball, he says to the catcher, slowly, hesitantly, his voice filled with awe. As the three of us walk across the vast emerald lake that is the outfield, I think of all the things I want to talk to the catcher about. I'll guide the conversations like taking a car around a log, gentle curve in the road, and we'll hardly realize that we're talking of love and family and life and beauty and friendship and sharing. And I think of Gypsy waiting for us, clutching the handful of bills that will act as the cement to keep the stadium solid and permanent as the game it houses, being baseball. And we are going to stop there. That is the end of part 4. And we are going to have one more part. And if you've seen the movie or know the story, then you'll know part 5, where is it? Is the Rapture of J.D. Salinger. And that'll be the end. So one more video for this book. And then we move on to a new book. Hey, if you guys have any suggestions or ideas of books that you would like me to read, absolutely. Feel free to drop me a message or comment on the video where you see it. And hey, I'm happy to give it consideration. Absolutely. All right, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you for joining me. I will see you next time.